Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Mr. Mayor, if you're about to be.
There. Thank you. We're joined this evening at council tables by Katie Gargano, who's be our recording secretary, city clerk, and tax collector. And would you please call the roll, Katie?
Counselor Cheney,
Here.
Counselor Susie,
Here.
Counselor Whitman,
Present.
Counselor Haynes,
Here.
Counselor Hamel,
Here.
Counselor Couch,
Here.
Mayor Hosmer.
Here. Thank you, Katie. We're also joined by city manager Scott Myers, as well as city finance director Glenn Smith, who's also handling our IT this evening. Thank you very much. Moving along our agenda to item number 7A, which is the regular meeting minutes of March 28th, 2022. I want to let Councilor Haynes, Mayor Pro Tem, how much I appreciate you taking over that meeting. Thank you very much. The minutes of the meeting of March 28th were distributed to the City Council on April 4th, 2022, with no corrections or changes submitted to the clerk. The minutes will be accepted as distributed. Moving on to item number 9, which is citizen comments for matters not on the agenda. If anyone's here in the chamber this evening who would like to speak to a matter that's not on tonight's agenda, now would be the appropriate time. Or perhaps if you're joining us online, you can raise your hand. Mr. Smith would acknowledge you and you can speak then.
Mr. Mayor, no online attendees have raised their hands.
Thank you. Moving on to item number 14 on our agenda. I'm getting a little feedback here. Anybody else getting that?
Just a smidge, please.
Should be one that says Maine.
It's going the other direction.
All right.
That's better.
That sounds better. Thank you. Item number 14 on presentations. Item 14A, which is our fiscal year 2023 budget presentation. I'll look to the city manager to lead the way.
Right. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, councilors, folks in attendance here tonight. We'll try to run through the overview. We do have a PowerPoint that I know is up in front of the council. We are having some Zoom and YouTube challenges, so I'm not sure it is going to present on the screen for those of you in the chamber. You get to look at my backside, I guess. So I apologize for that, but with this wonderful technology, sometimes it works great and sometimes we can't get it to do all the things that we hope to do. So I do have budget books to hand out for mayor and council at the end of the evening tonight for you to take with you. And I'm sure there'll be a pop quiz or something tomorrow on the entire pages of the document. So we'll go through. So anyhow, and it's not letting me control Glenn. So are you controlling for me? So move pages. Back.
Is able to do that live or not?
Council Lippman has mentioned something. Is there, if we can't go live with this for people who are joining us virtually, can you upload it to the website?
Absolutely. We'll put the PowerPoint up and we load the budget document tomorrow so they can get the two. I was just going to move. It was just a.
And the people on Zoom are seeing what you're seeing.
Okay,
Okay.
terrific.
Am I just double tapping to move it forward, not the arrows?
Yep, on the right.
On this one, okay, all right. So it's been a long couple of years with COVID, and we just wanted to do a little bit of an overview of what the differences were in putting the budget together this year versus where we were last year. So if you think of year one, COVID began when it was identified in March of 20. If you think about, so that's 2 years ago, roughly from now. If you think a year ago from now, Vaccines were just beginning to get rolled out to those over 65 or 70 or whatever the first age group was. First responders and healthcare workers and frontline folks had access to it in January, February. But right around now is just when the general population was starting to get vaccinated. We were a lot of unknowns at the time. We were also in a state budget year because the state adopts a biennium budget, and they were working on a budget that was going to get us through the next 2 years. There was a lot of uncertainty as to what revenues were going to look like coming from the state to the local level, because a lot of our revenues, the largest ones anyway, relate to rooms and meals. And we all know what happened to the restaurant and the lodging industry. And it also relates to the gas tax. And we all know that with people working from home and not commuting and school buses not running, the volume of gallons of gasoline was dropping. So there was a lot of uncertainty last year at this time. This year, we're in an off budget year. So the state adopted its budget last June or July. There's no budget cycle this year. We know what to expect. So it's a lot more predictable as to what the impacts are for Laconia and all local municipalities. Last year at this time as well, remember I've got the acronym messed up here. It's supposed to be ARPA as opposed to American Rescue Act Plan, but American Rescue Plan Act, ARPA. We were waiting on guidance. There was money coming down, but yet communities didn't know what they were allowed to spend it on at that time. Over the last 2 years, a lot of stimulus money, a lot of support money for communities, municipalities, schools has come out, and we're much clearer with the guidance at this point going forward on it. And then also, we didn't know what was going to happen with city revenues, where people were going to be, replacing cars, and what was our motor vehicle registration was going to do. Were we going to have additional operating expenses with, cleaning, and what was going to happen to our employee workforce? Were we going to have a lot of people out, either themselves being sick or family members sick that they were home taking care of? And we didn't, we were really 2 years ago kind of just winging a little bit, because there was nothing in our history that could really prepare us for what might happen. And now we've got 24 months of history under our belt. We've got the trends of what has happened with people being able to meet their commitments to pay property taxes. We've seen what the motor vehicles are doing. We've seen the rebound from the state in the gas tax and the rooms and meals. So we feel we're on much more solid ground today than even where we were last year, and especially where we were 2 years ago at this time. So what does this budget include? It includes revenue projections, both for the city and the school, a city appropriation, a school department appropriation. It also includes the state property tax assessment, known as the statewide education tax. And it also has the Laconia share of the Belknap County tax assessment. Also within the budget, items that are outside of the general fund, the general operating budget, those include individual standalone budgets for the enterprise funds for the water department and the sewer department. Those are paid for by user fees, and there's no property tax dollars that go in to support those operations. We also have the internal service fund, which all departments in the city kick into to handle all of our vehicle purchases, maintenance, gasoline, replacements, all come through one internal service fund. And then we have the special revenue accounts for Motorcycle Week and the ambulance. And then we have the 3 tax increment finance districts. So the downtown TIF, the Lakeport TIF, and the Weirs TIF are also included in this budget. This budget prioritizes a lot of the same things we've been focusing on for years: core municipal services, public safety, education, infrastructure maintenance, and our water and sewer services. City is governed by a tax cap since the mid 2005 area. And basically it's a limitation on how much can be raised on an annual basis through property taxes. And there's 2 components to it. The first one is the Consumer Price Index Urban, which is the inflation number that runs on the calendar year from calendar year 2021, runs from January through December. Those 12 months as they get reported all get combined together. And we come up with the annual inflation number for calendar year 21, which ended up being 4.7%. That component of it across all departments of schools, city, and county would allow an increase of spending of just short of $2.3 million. New construction value is the second component of the tax cap, because as new value comes online, the value of that construction gets added to the city's overall assessment. And when you divide the overall assessment into what you're looking to raise in taxes, that's what sets your tax rate for you. So it's important that we stay current and we include the increased valuation of the new building permits. We're not inflating this number for overall market conditions of just the market being strong and folks have seen their assessments go up. This is just strictly the value of new building permits that are being pulled. And again, for the assessing year, which is tied into the state, that's how we track our building permit value. So that year runs from April 1st of 2021, and it just ended as of March 31st of of the year 2022. So we just closed the books on the assessing year a couple of weeks ago. So 48.6 million. Last year's number for comparison was at 39 million. And the numbers for the prior years were all probably in the $16 to $22 million range. So we really have seen a huge influx in new construction value across the city in the last 2 years in particular. And the big slide of the night, this is a tax cap compliant budget. It complies with the language found in our charter, and the overall increase to this budget is 4%. By function, what can each function of the city spend based on their share of the overall budget pie? The city side could increase by a little less than $1.3 million. The school side about $1,750,000, and the county, if they were subject to our tax cap, which they are not, when we calculate their component of it, they would be allowed to raise Laconia's share of the county budget by $167,000, and that number would remain tax cap compliant if it were. So what did happen? So city, meaning non-school spending, increases by a little over $1.9 million or 6.8% rate. School department spending, excluding the federal and food service funds, increases by $1.7 million. We just spoke with the county, but the county increased Laconia's share up by $473,000. So that's an 18.6% increase. So we actually had to make reductions on the city portion of the budget because I'm charged with putting all of these pieces together and bringing you one budget, which is all we have, even though there's various components of it, but making sure that that one budget is tax cap compliant. Non-property tax revenue in the city, meaning things like motor vehicle registrations, building permit fees, fees in the clerk's office or the tax office, increase by approximately $974,000. And again, the valuation up by 48.6 million. So what were the big drivers in this budget? Wages. We are working on collective bargaining agreements with all 4 of the city side unions. You do have on your agenda this evening a tentative agreement with the teachers union. And just going back a few slides, we talked about what inflation was doing. Inflation running at 4.7%. So our employees are feeling the same pinches that you and I feel and that the city feels when we're going to fuel up our vehicles and we're going to purchase asphalt for our road projects, which has a petroleum component to it, and we replace vehicles and we do all the things that the city does. Inflation running at 4.7 certainly is tying into some of the labor negotiations that are currently ongoing with our groups and also for our non-union folks. Our health insurance increase this year based on the city's claim history. We've got a finalized increase of 9.26%, so roughly a 9.25% increase in health insurance. We have a few new positions that are proposed for this budget. I'll go over those in a minute. We've talked both at the committee level and also at the council level on a number of fronts about the increase we are going to see in solid waste expense this year, whether it's in the curbside collection, whether it's in the cost of hauling because of diesel fuel and the surcharges going up. It's just costing more to take it from point A to point B to dispose of it. And then also what we refer to as the tipping fees, what it actually costs us per ton to dispose of the materials that we do haul away. So we know there's a significant increase already built in for solid waste, and that's reflected in the budget. Capital outlay continues to be a major component so we can take care of our infrastructure, our bridges, our streets, our buildings, our playgrounds, our vehicles. Some city council priorities that have come out of budget conversations going back to last year and through this year. And then this budget also includes all remaining Colonial Theater expenses that we had kind of stepped in, and then we were delayed a little bit with COVID and the building coming online and that type of stuff. So every expense that's attributable to the Colonial is finally built into the budget that I'm presenting tonight. As I mentioned, wages and health insurance, we're in negotiations right now with inflation running in excess of 4%. We're certainly seeing that pressure on wages at the negotiating tables with our groups. The health insurance I just spoke of the increase of 9.26%. we've made assumptions within the budget. As you know, the council has the final authority to approve tentative agreements and collective bargaining agreements. But we've made assumptions in here based on where we are at with negotiations. So, at the end of the day, if I bring you an agreement and you're going to say, is the money built into the budget somewhere to do that? Yes, it's based on reasonable assumptions. If I bring you an agreement, I'm not all of a sudden going to say, oh no, now we have to go back to the budget and add more money into it. So if we don't come to agreement with some of the unions, we probably have a little bit too much money in the wage line item and probably not enough in the health insurance item, but it's fungible, if you will, and we can slide one to the other as employee cost. Within this budget and tied in with some of the grants that you've seen and approved, we have 4 new police officer positions, 3 of which will be the grant funded that you recently approved a couple of meetings back. There was the COSUP grant tied in with the Eric Adams position, if you will, the prevention, enforcement and treatment program, and how that program that Laconia started is being rolled out statewide now to another 6 or 7 communities. So we have 4 new positions that we would be hoping to fill. Again, there's challenging times in hiring and public safety right now. One of those positions is funded through the general fund. The other 3 of those positions are all funded through grant. We have 1 new assistant prosecutor position. The request was for full-time. In order to help try to step this in, if you will, I've proposed that this position be allowed to be filled as of January 1. So that's a different way of saying we've got a half-year salary and a half-year worth of benefits built into this budget. The other half would have to be stepped in next year at this time. As the council's aware, we've applied for a SAFER grant for the fire department, and SAFER stands for Staffing Adequate Fire Emergency Response, or something very close to that, if I don't have that acronym, but it's really to allow communities to add firefighters as their volume and the workload picks up. So we've got a grant in for 4 positions. It was filed back in February at the deadline, or prior to the deadline, and that's a rolling announcement, and we anticipate the announcement of those grants coming out somewhere around Memorial Day, maybe the first part of June. What I've done here is as a kind of a safety net, I've added 4 positions again for hiring date of January 1. So we've added 4 positions in, but basically funded them for half a year. If the grant materializes, we can certainly back out the dollars that are in the budget for that, and the council can decide what they choose to do with those funds. If we're not successful with the grant, the intention would be that we could start hiring 4 firefighters, and that would bring the 4 platoons we have at a full staffing level from 9 firefighters to 10 firefighters. And as you see in your financial and operational trends report, including tonight, fire department and our police department have been very busy in the public safety sector. Again, we have 1 new year-round recreation and facilities employee to help support our fields, parks, playgrounds, maintenance of buildings, and that type of stuff. And we know that has been a topic of conversation and a priority for council over the past year, if not more. And then we have an administrative support position in code going from part-time to full-time. And that's basically just driven by some of the workload, also adding in things like short-term rentals now that we didn't used to have, and other support that they do for commissions like the Historic District Commission, which didn't exist. So everything here is based on demand and need of the volume of work that is going on. So I don't know if anybody wants to, in the audience, wants a copy of that sheet. So I provided the council this one with yellow highlights. There was no simple way to hopefully get this readable for you within a PowerPoint. So this goes back to a couple of items that I asked the council to jumpstart with some existing dollars a couple of meetings back. Things like the beach improvements and water access, and the police communications recorder, because we're changing over the phone system. So I had indicated when Councilor Hamel raised a question that there's kind of a master sister document to the budget. This is not part of the budget necessarily, but this ties in with money that we were able to fund into the budget, along with some dollars that either are there right now in some ARPA funds or will be there in some ARPA funds come August of 23. So won't get into it in great detail, but the first column shows you a total of $2 million in items that are built into the proposed budget in cash. We're paying cash for that. There's $1.5 million for streets. There's others down there as well. The next one over in yellow were some carry forwards that we had some money left from a specific project that the council already reallocated. We don't have to focus on those. The next column is some remaining funds from the fiscal year 22 ARPA allocation, and we've got a couple of recommendations there. And then going over to the next to last column, we're anticipated to receive $867,000 in ARPA funds in August of this calendar year. So we've got a list of projects that we would like to use to use the ARPA funds to support the projects. And again, that's not part of the budget adoption necessarily, but it will be when the ARPA funds become available in August. So that's kind of a roadmap of things that made the budget and other things that are really important in infrastructure and other capital projects that we'd like to fund through some alternative sources. I know this is near and dear to Councilor Lippman's heart. He was working on a particular bill in the legislature and the Senate that was on a whole different path. And then through some surplus funds that the state is recognizing now through their budget process and revenues coming in higher than expected, they stripped everything out of the original bill and made it a property tax relief bill, as they referred to it. And they put some money in there for the state bridge aid program for municipalities. So when we go in, it's an 80-20 split, with the state picking up 80% and the local match being 20%. By them putting in $36 million, if this passes and the governor signs it, there's more money that goes into the bridge program, which means more bridges that are in the 10-year list will get done sooner. I don't think there's anyone who could say that the state and the locals are spending too much money on bridges right now with the number of red listed ones we have. The second one that's there is there's an additional $30 million that's going to local street and highway projects. And the proposal, again, if it passes the House and gets signed by the governor, and it came out of the Senate unanimously, so obviously broad bipartisan support, will mean an additional $30 million distributed across the state to municipalities, the same way they distribute the 12% share of the gas tax that the locals receive right now anyway. So there'll be almost double the money. So what we try to do with that is we increased revenue by 250,000, which is our share, and we bumped up streets by 250,000. If for some reason this bill dies or it changes into something else and that money doesn't change, it's a real simple, we're back in revenue down by 250,000, and we're dropping streets to what I was originally proposing of $1,250,000. So we're using this money if it materializes for the streets, which it was intended for. And if it doesn't blow up the whole budget. It's kind of one and off money is the way we're looking at it. I do expect, based on how it came out of the Senate, and I can't imagine too many legislators or the governor would not wanting to be able to tout that they provided property tax relief to the local level. I would think that this has a good chance of going forward. So that's kind of the long range between now and August overview of some money that's available now to be allocated, some money that will be available when you adopt the budget, and some additional funds that will become available in the August timeframe. And we will be spending a lot more time. And all these projects came through the capital improvements program process. So those counselors who served on this saw all these projects. There's nothing here that hasn't been vetted at that committee level and ranked and prioritized. And these are all things that have been presented to a city board. So again, the proposed budget contains funding for supporting all of our employees with an updated wage and benefit package, supporting the challenging dynamics in hiring and retention of public safety employees, and that's trying to increase our levels and therefore lessen the workload a little bit for some of these folks who are taking on a lot of projects and special challenges that necessarily weren't part of the job 10, 15, 20 years ago. It's increasing fund for parks and facilities for better care of our maintenance of our parks and playgrounds. It's improving our IT capabilities. I know those on the finance committee, as we were going through best practices and reviewing those a couple of years ago, questions were coming up about our IT. What were our firewalls like? Were we doing training for employees? Were we doing phishing tests and phishing with a PH, not with an F? What we were doing for penetration testing and bringing outside consultants in, trying to probe our existing system and our servers and find out where we might have weaknesses. So this makes an increased investment in our IT capabilities. And then again, as I just went through the sheet, investing in capital infrastructure and using one-time dollars for one-time projects. The worst thing I think we could do as a body is take one-time dollars and build them into the operating budget, because you just set yourself up for failure the following year, because you've got to find all this money just to stay status quo on it. So Revenue increases, again, what's driving it, increase in rooms and meals and the highway block grant that I just spoke of. We've seen motor vehicle registrations continue to remain strong. We've got some miscellaneous revenue coming back from a return of surplus from our health insurance carrier, as well as a one-time transfer in from health insurance stabilization fund. And then also a slight reduction in the use of fund balance. So it's not a revenue, but we're reducing our dependency on a revenue from its current level of 700,000 of fund balance down to 685,000. I did a little research. So I started with the city in 2011. And I started July 1st. So I came in like at the tail end of the budget session for fiscal year 12. I started in July and the budget was adopted 3 or 4 weeks later. So I'm not saying good, bad, or indifferent, but that wasn't my budget. And if you think about it, the country and Laconia, no exception, just came out of very challenging 4 years in a real downturn economically from 08, 9, 10, and 11. It was not a good time. And councils were reducing budgets in order to reflect what the residents were seeing and the ability to pay. So when you go and cut most budgets, you're not finding it in paper clips and supplies. You're finding it either in staffing or you're finding it in capital is where your big dollars are. In that budget, when it was approved in July of 2011, we had $1,190,000 in cash in capital in that budget. And I just showed you the slide back. This year, the proposed budget has $2 million in cash in the capital side of the budget for recurring expenses. And that hasn't occurred overnight. That's just been baby steps and incremental, and let's take recurring expenses and not put them on the credit card. Let's pay as we go type of thing. And that's a credit to all of you sitting here today and all of you who've sat there, and I'll look at Councilors Hamill and Lippman because they've been here longer than I have, but they've been on this ride with me for the last 10 or 11 budgets anyway, including this one tonight. But little baby steps and not, putting everything on debt service, which sets us up for failure in the out years, I think is very important. The second thing I mentioned with the bottom bullet point on this slide is the first year I was here, $1,268,000 came out of the undesignated fund balance, the rainy day fund, if you will, to help reduce taxes within the budget. And if you only have $4 or $5 million in your rainy, and I say only, I know it's a big number, but if you only have $4 or $5 million in your rainy day fund and you're pulling out $1.2 million every year, you either need to replenish it very quickly or you're going to drain it very quickly. And then all of a sudden you've set yourself up for a large increase or a major reduction in spending. So again, so not only did the capital increase by 68% over the last 8 years to the positive, we've weaned ourselves from the use of fund budget from the $1,268,000 down to the $685,000 proposed here. If you authorize it, we've reduced the dependency on fund budget by 46%. And again, baby steps, but being consistent and being true to the mission. Congratulations to all of you collectively for your parts in doing that. Really sets the city up to be in a strong position. So again, there'll be more recommendations coming forward as we continue to work on the budget with all of your input, utilizing the ARPA funds, the traditional carry forwards of monies that haven't been spent or won't be spent by the close of this fiscal year, June 30th, that we need to carry forward for projects that for whatever reason just aren't completed yet, but are still needed. And then anything else may be funded through the non-capital reserve account. Tomorrow morning, the complete budget document will be found on the city website, and along with this PowerPoint, we'll put that there as well. So people either have like a quick executive type of read to it if they don't want to go through the whole document. We will have print copies here in City Hall and also at the library available. So I'll start working with the mayor on a calendar over pretty much May and June to start doing the budget presentations. Certainly we here in the city, along with the school administration, the school board, department heads, really look forward to coming in and sharing their budgets with you, because it's an opportunity for all of them to tell their stories. What their departments are working on, what their focus is on, how it's tying into goals that you have, and what's really driving their budgets this year. So we certainly welcome all of your input from the citizens to help us craft a budget. And again, thank you to all the department heads. You as the city council are beginning your work now, but certainly you will be putting in a lot of time on this. School board has put in a lot of time, so thank you to them and the school administration, and specifically Glenn Smith, who we really start this process that he sends out documents back in November to department heads, and he starts compiling in December, and usually by early January, I've got the first draft of what everything looks like and how it's gone in, and then adjust and tweak and watch what the tax cap allows and watch what happens at the legislature and the state and try to bring it all together here and get you what we got tonight. So when you leave tonight, I've got budget books for you all and happy to take any general questions right now. I know you haven't seen the budget yet, so there probably aren't any detailed questions, but happy to take any general comments or questions anyone may have.
I think the only, the comment I have right now was, first of all, thank you. Thank you for, I don't remember how many budgets cycles I've been through here, but a handful. And it's always remarkable to think about how much work goes into building a budget in this city and how it comes around very quickly. And, you know, by the time July comes around, we voted on the final budget. Next thing you know, it's a few months later that you guys are working on a budget again. So
Don't scare Glenn like that, okay? He's gonna start shaking on me.
thank you very much to you and your team for the work that you've put in. I look forward to doing a deeper dive with everyone up here in the weeks to come. Councilor Hamel.
Thank you, Mayor. I'd just like to echo what the mayor said. Thank you, Scott, for 11 years of tax cap compliant budgets, and most of them have been under the tax cap a little bit, and even this year is that way.
Sure is.
I remember 17 years ago when I started here, our capital for roads were like $300,000 to $500,000. That's what we had for all our roads. And over that time, you've brought it up to 1.5. Even though it doesn't get us as much bang for the buck as it used to. That's impressive. And, you know, you and your staff and Glenn and everybody else have done a tremendous job to keep the city in a good financial position that you have. So thank you.
Thank you, appreciate it. And you hit the nail on the head. It's been a team effort.
Any other comments for the city manager? Questions? No. Oh, I knew you could.
Throw a real question.
Uh-oh.
We can.
So when we have a chance, maybe next meeting, if, you know, looking at some of our reserve accounts, this is another good thing we've had set up over the years, is we've had years, for example, where we've had a surplus and come back to us, whether it be health insurance or snow removal, whatever, just taking a look at those.
I think they're actually in tonight's financial and operational trends. So you'll have current numbers. And obviously I spoke of, we're going to be backing out if you approve with 120,000 out of the health insurance stabilization to bring a one-time revenue into this budget. But yes, we can focus a little bit on those tonight.
Thank you.
Thanks very much, Scott.
Thank you.
Oh, Councilor Genie, sorry about that. You were so.
Oh, no,
close.
that's quite all right. I kind of want to come from a different side. I've sat on the other side of the table from city managers and others in government for close to 50 years. And the one thing I've noticed, it's primarily in your budget work, but throughout your work, is the fact that you've been able to do it without developing animosity. And I think that's to be commended. To get all these figures to work the way they're working and not have revolts is commendable.
Thank you.
Thanks, Scott.
All right, I'm going now.
Yeah.
In more ways than one.
Moving along to item number 15 is the mayor's report. I'm going to forego my remarks this evening and move right along to council comments. Comments from councilors this evening. How about committee reports? Liaison reports?
It's there on item 17.
Oh, I always skip one. I did committee reports. Council comments, excuse me, council comments, committee reports. I'm on committee reports, yeah.
He did it. Yeah, that's what I was asking for 17, under 17F. That's what I'm getting.
Appointments, yes, okay.
Okay.
Yeah, sure.
From the appointments committee of Councilor Cheney, myself and Councilor Haynes, we met a couple of weeks ago with a number of different people that were interviewed for many different positions. Okay. It was, as I said at the last meeting, if you weren't here, Mr. Mayor, it was a very enlightening discussion with many people. We learned a lot that we didn't know. Okay, and I learned a lot of people. It was really good to take that approach because they were able to probably be more open. We had a lot of discussion, questions, and learned a lot in that sense. And from that, and we have a page that you all should have received. And we'd like to move ahead and propose this motion, if you don't mind, Mr. Mayor.
No.
Okay. Move that the city council approves the appointment or reappointment of candidates to the city boards and commissions as presented and recommended by the appointments committee.
Okay, so would
I can read all of these if you wish.
certainly, if you like to, I think it's good to have that done. So if you do that, that'd be just great.
And the appointments subcommittee met on February 28th, interviewed several candidates for appointment or reappointment to the city's boards and commissions. The appointments subcommittee strongly recommends the appointment of the following individuals for the term shown. If I mispronounce any of the names, I apologize ahead of time, so. Lois Kesson, reappointment as regular member of the Heritage Commission to a term expiring at the end of March 2025. David Stamps, reappointment as public member of the Highway Safety Commission to a term expiring at the end of March 25. Arthur Kirk, reappointment as a regular member of the Parks and Recreation Commission to a term expiring at the end of March 2025. Margaret Selig, reappointment as a member of the trustee of the trust funds to a term expiring at the end of March 2025. Rodney Roy, reappointment as a member of the Parks and Recreation Commission to a term expiring at the end of 2025. Robert Durfee, reappointment as a regular member of the Building Code of Appeals as a registered engineer to a term expiring at the end of 2027. Marjorie Wilkinson, appointment as a regular member of the Heritage Commission to a term expiring at the end of March 2025. Richard Bodie, appointment as an alternate to the Zoning Board of Adjustment to a term expiring at the end of 2025. And appointment as a regular member of the Building Code of Appeals as a registered electrician to a term expiring at the end of March 2027. Bruce Knurr, reappointment as an alternate member of the Library Board of Trustees to a term expiring at the end of March 2023. John Moriarty, reappointment as a regular member of the Library Board of Trustees to a term expiring at the end of March 2025. And Louis Joseph, appointment as a member, alternate member of the Planning Board to a position expiring at the end of 2025.
Thank you, Counselor Susie. So Counselor Susie has motioned to approve the appointment or reappointment of all the candidates, seconded by Counselor Felch. Is there any further discussion on this?
I'd like to say one more thing,
Nice.
okay? Also, I'd like to really thank Mrs. Brown from the city manager's office, working with us, putting all this together, getting all the resumes together, different people, and also pointing out to us, for example, in our discussion with each of these candidates, Mr. Bodie, we had no idea that it was a registered electrician, master electrician. We needed one for one of our other boards. So he volunteered to participate that way. And it was very, very helpful. I mean, very enlightening. And I just want to thank the whole council for allowing that committee to do its job. And we have more people lined up already that are going to be coming to our next meeting for some more interviews. And as a committee, we're also going to, Ms. Brown is putting together for us a letter that we're going to put in the Sun, asking for people to come in and participate.
Great.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you.
So two things to add. I think, first of all, I think the appointments committee worked out very well. I sat with their organizational meeting and Nancy Brown has done it. And I've asked Nancy if she would like to continue as a staff liaison to this because she's the one who puts together all the letters to the folks in the first place and puts together the agendas, and she's happy to. So that's great that you'll have that continuity with it. Just as a process, this is the first time the appointments committee in its very short existence has brought together a slate. It probably would be appropriate, once there's a motion and a second, that almost treat it like a consent calendar. And if there was anybody who wanted to pull out one name for a separate discussion or a vote, you would be able to vote on the remainder of the motion there as a consent item. So I'm just throwing that out, that if somebody had a question about someone, you don't have to throw the whole baby out with the bathwater. You can just say, remove one name and it doesn't need a second or anything, and just be, hey, I'd like to follow up on that one. and then you would vote on the remainder of the consent as presented, and then go back and focus on that one if it ever came to that.
Sounds like a good idea. I don't think anyone's taken advantage of it at this point, but for discussions purposes, Counselor Susie, this was your idea. I thought it was a great idea the moment I heard it. So thanks for taking the lead on this as well.
Thank
I
you.
think it's a more thorough process and gives you some insights that we just weren't getting when people were showing up and introducing themselves necessarily. So
I think, as Councilor Haynes has said, we learned a lot just from talking to a lot of the people that are already on the boards and what other, let's say, specialties they can bring, which is really good.
great. So the motion's on. I'll go right ahead,
just-
Counselor Haynes.
It was a very relaxed atmosphere, and I think the people that, I want to say we had a discussion, I don't really consider it an interview, but they brought a lot to the table, and as Councilor Susie said, we learned some things we didn't know.
Good.
Thank you.
All right, motion on the table, and there's a second. If everyone has made comments or had an opportunity to speak, let's call the question. All those in favor of the motion, please indicate by raising your hands. It's 6 votes in the affirmative. That motion passes. Thank you very much again. Now we can move on to number 18, which is liaison reports. Any liaison reports this evening? Seeing none, moving on to item number 19, which is citizens' request to comment on current agenda items. If there's an agenda item that you would like to speak to, now would be the appropriate time, whether you're here in the chamber or online. Mr. Smith, I'll let you indicate if someone is online.
No online attendees have raised it.
Terrific. Moving on to item number 20, which is the city manager's report. I'll turn it over to Scott Myers.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll be brief on this because I probably covered half of this during the budget presentation, but you have included in your packet the financial and operational trends report for April, which carries us through the end of March. We've already spoke of the assessing year, so that is completed now. So the new year rolls over as of April 1, and next month at this time, you'll see a much smaller number than we're looking at, but it's the start of the year. The fire call is here and the police data is on page 2, and I think you all know that they're very busy departments on a year-round basis. On the bottom of the first page, the public assistance data, while our gross relief is up a little bit, if you slide over a couple of columns or down a line or so and then over, you'll see we've received some reimbursement so that our net cost, if you look at the very bottom line, we've received reimbursement this year of over $10,000. So that brings the net cost down a little bit. Some of that's due to some of the state programs or even the community development block grant COVID related awards that the city and some social service agencies within the city have received. Property tax collection on the second page, over 99%. Again, COVID really has not impacted that over the last couple of years, and that's the strongest collection level we've seen going back to 2014. That's on this sheet here. Motor vehicles continue to be strong. We're at 78% of budget when we're 3/4 of the way through the year. So we're trending a little bit over 3% ahead of our revenue projections, and those projections actually increased from last year by 120,000. So we're ahead of pace, and the pace was an increased number from the prior year. The overtime numbers across various departments. I know I spoke of that a little bit at a couple meetings ago when we had this report. So unless there's any questions, we'll move on. We're starting to see some more activity as we're coming out of COVID for the use of facilities and parks and recreation amenities here in the city. So that's good to see that things are starting to move in a little bit of a positive manner. You'll see the impact fee revenues. The revenue year to date has been 113,000. Glenn brought to my attention that that's the highest number that we've seen in about 6 years. Upon a little deeper digging, we did have one large developer who chose to prepay impact fees now rather than the increase that was going into place coming up in the near future. So we did receive a nice little advance payment, but now it's cash in our bank. So anyway, it's good to see those balances continue to move. At the top of page 5 of the report, those are the items that Councilor Lippman was speaking of. So Over the years, we funded what we refer to as a non-capital reserve account. And that's basically for some smaller capital needs that may crop up during the course of the year that you don't necessarily plan on. A roof may go, a compressor on an air conditioning unit may have challenges, and elevator may need something that, you know, $10, $15, $20,000 that you weren't planning on. So we've got about a $430,000 balance in a reserve capital account, if you will. The next account we have in a reserve is the accrued leave account. So sometimes when we have some dollars left in the budget, we're able to fund that account. So if we have a long career employee who has a end of career payout, a lot of times we try to find 50% of those funds within that department budget and use some money that we've put aside to help pay out those final retirement costs, if you will. The winter maintenance reserve account is just that. No one can predict the weather that I know of. So years that we have a very mild winter and don't use all of our funds and don't need all of the salt and the sand, we've put that aside into a winter maintenance account for the years that we have a harsher winter and we go through a lot more material, and therefore it doesn't force us to not do roads or not do sidewalks because we had a harsh winter. So that winter maintenance account has $163,000 in it. The health insurance stabilization account, which I spoke of, the proposal is to transfer $120,000 out of that $170,000 to help soften the 9.26% health insurance increase this year. Again, so that we're not foregoing other needed items in order just to fund health insurance. And then you see the balances in the various tax increment finance districts. And again, the downtown in particular and the Weirs one as well. Some of those funds come in and help support various capital projects that have occurred in their various districts. So in the downtown area, the downtown TIF pays a portion of the Riverwalk and the Wow Trail debt service that we have. They're also paying a portion of the Colonial Theater debt service that we have. And in the Weirs, that district helped do some of the nice to have is when the city did the major reconstruction in Lakeside Avenue, and we did the nice ornamental lights and the nice bump outs and the stamped concrete crosswalks and those types of things that were more than just the bread and butter of the project of streets and sidewalks and drainage. So again, that Weirs TIF district is supporting part of that debt service. So boat taxes, we're on track basically with the last 2 years. You can see the ambulance billing history at the bottom of the page. And our last calculated winter cleanup cost happened on March 13th. And I'm hoping, because the police chief went out on a limb and ended the winter parking ban early, which usually would run until May 1st. So he relinquished the parking ban last week. So hopefully the chief's got a good crystal ball and we've got no more winter maintenance. So I will stop there and take any questions anybody may have tonight.
Scott, just a question, actually looking at winter maintenance, what we've budgeted compared to what we've got for a balance, right? That money not being spent, how do you handle that?
Well, right now it's we've got a couple of things here. So if you look at the breakout, we put a certain amount in for materials like salt, sand, and then plow blade repairs and that type of stuff. So that's the winter maintenance account. Then we have the outside contractors account, which are true contractors that we estimate that do certain parking lots for us. And we just pick how many storms, you know, an average we think they're going to come in and plow and do that. So if we have twice as many storms, we're going to overspend that because they're going to have to come twice as many times. It's not a fixed price. They're coming per storm. And then the winter maintenance overtime, we take an estimate of the overall public works overtime and break it out and just kind of allocate it here to the storms. When you look up above and you see the overtime hours and the contract hours and what we spent for tons of salt and sand on a particular storm, you see the actual cost of a storm. So at the end of the day, we're overspent on overtime. We're underspent a little bit on winter maintenance. You know, there might be a $30,000 or $40,000 to the good. I'm not sure if we might, you know, want to purchase some blade parts. So we've got a little bit in the inventory going into next winter or not. I'll leave that to Wes, but there's really not going to be a sizable amount that's left in the winter maintenance account. So either way we would, you know, stock the shelves with some parts, or if it was a small enough amount, it could flow into streets, or it might just flow into fund balance. Going back to, we're spending $685,000 out of fund balance. It either needs to come from us underspending certain accounts or our revenues coming in higher than we budgeted for. Those are the two elements that help replenish the fund balance. So
So it wouldn't go back, excuse me,
Right ahead.
it wouldn't go back into the reserve account for the winter maintenance?
it absolutely could. So if there was a desire to move the roughly 30,000, we could do that Typically, that's small change, and we typically don't chase that necessarily. We'll let it flow into the general fund balance and go there. If it was a number over, 75,000 or greater, then certainly we want to capture that and move that.
Thank you.
Counselor Hamel.
Yes, Scott, this is a what if question. On the very front there for the construction, the built permits, 84.6 million.
48.6.
Yeah, 48. Say like next year, that's halved or worse. I mean, obviously, that's going to have a pretty good effect on the budget.
And no different than an inflation number coming in at 1% or 2%, or in some cases at 0, which we have. So the tax cap is two components. It's what is the growth of whatever inflation is, because that's supposed to reflect what the cost of doing business is. And then if new construction comes online, the theory behind that is X number of housing units are now going to require a little bit more police coverage, a little bit more fire coverage. Potentially, if there's children in the school system, what does it do to class sizes? And nothing's a perfect science, but as that new value comes online, maybe if you don't capture it for 1 year or 2 year, no big deal. But, over 10 years, if you think of the neighborhoods that might have popped up over the last 10 years that we're now plowing and paving and picking up trash on, the city's cost incrementally goes up, even with the, Linney Lane 7 or 8 years ago. It's probably got 20 houses on it. But that's 20 more stops for the trash truck. And that's a new street we've got to, pave. And that's additional sewer line that we need to clean and camera and do things with. So that's what the new value does. So that gets added to your base, and that's basically a wash. So the value that comes on gets added to our assessment. And now when you divide the amount to be raised by taxes by your assessment, you've raised that a little bit, and that kind of equalizes things. So your real growth comes from the inflation number. Your assessment number really keeps pace for what new came on in the city that now you might be maintaining.
So if we build a budget like with this figure here, 48, and next year it's half, and there's contracts and everything else that we're committed to, wouldn't that put the budget in a little bit of jeopardy where we'd have to look for different things?
No, not at all. Actually, once you build that baseline into the budget, that's your new starting number next year, and your increase is based on what gets adopted this year. So you're not deficit financing, if you will. You're not using one-time funds for contracts or building it in. That number becomes locked, and that's your base for next year. So it may not allow as much space under the cap, overall. But if you think about it, it's almost, if you look at the prior 8 years, and I can pull it up and send it to you, other than this year and last year, all of our numbers ran in the $15 and $20 million range. And as you said, we made it work, and we came in with tax cap compliant budgets, and we weren't laying off staff, and we weren't cutting capital. We've been very prudent and conservative as a body with our steps. And I would expect nothing different regardless of where the number comes next year.
Okay. My other question is overtime. There's a few departments that have gone over 100% of their budget. Where is that extra money coming from to pay that?
And as I mentioned to you a little bit, and I think I sent that out when I sent the year-end calendar year wage schedule. Some of that's a little bit deceiving, because some of that we're getting reimbursed from other places. If we've got police detail that are working at some of the vaccine clinics that were going on, and we've got some of our first responders who are administering vaccines. And you think of all the time in the prior year when the Doobie building was being operated, there was a police detail. They get paid through our payroll system, and if it's overtime, it's overtime, but there's a reimbursement for that. So that's where it needs to come out in the wash. And the flip side is there is more overtime this year. Part of that may be due to COVID, quarantining, people having family members where they've got to go home and take care of someone. But if you also think of it, there's probably been more shift coverage this past year because things were starting to get back to normal, and where nobody went on April vacation in 2020 and 2021 to go down to Disney with their kids and go do Florida. This year they're doing it. So people, there's a pent up demand where people just haven't traveled, and they've got the time banked. And, we may have saved some money on vacation and that type of time over the last couple of years, but rightly so. Our employees work hard, and they're entitled to it. And we all know we've been shut down for the most part for a long stretch here, and some of that's now going to come full cycle for us.
Okay, thank you.
Welcome.
Any other questions or comments for the city manager on this agenda item? Okay. Thank you again, Scott.
Thank you.
Moving on to item number 21, under 21A, which is the collective bargaining agreement with the,
I apologize. I had two more quick things to put out here. I'm sorry. Two appointments that were made. One, there's two folks on the Personnel Advisory Committee who collectively are able to appoint the third person. They had a vacancy. They've appointed Kelly McAvoy, who has got a strong HR background and seems like a great fit for that committee. And then Jim Rice is the assessor in Durham, lives in Laconia. He's currently an alternate on our assessing board, and there's an opening for a full-time position. And Jim will be moving up and taking the full-time position and for the remainder of that term, and then would be back before us, before me a year from now, to be reappointed to a 3-year term. So Jim currently serves as an alternate, and he'll be a full member of the assessor. And I promise I'm done now.
thank you. Let's move along to item number 21A, which is collective bargaining agreement with the Laconia Education Association, the LEA. City Council met in non-meeting earlier this evening to review the collective bargaining agreement with the Laconia Education Association. Under state law, the SAU needs to notify teachers if they are being rehired for the next school year by April 15th. So a vote on the agreement is being requested at this time. The first year of the contract, covering 188 members, is anticipated to be $555,422. This report was worked on in conjunction with the SAU by Scott Myers and submitted. So right now, I'd be looking for a motion to approve the collective bargaining agreement with the Laconia Education Association, covering 188 members at an anticipated cost of $555,422 as presented. So made by Counselor Susie, seconded by Counselor Haynes. Is there any further discussion on the motion before us?
Can you just explain for the public what the limits are for this vote,
What the limits are?
in terms of what we can speak to at this point?
Oh, right now, we can't speak to the details of the contract, only the total dollar amount. But we will, we have Superintendent Tucker here, as well as School Board Chair Hayward. And I assume that we'll invite them up after the vote to go into some of the details.
It has to be ratified, correct? It has to be re-ratified before it can. we can discuss
If you
it.
vote on it tonight, it's already been approved at the school level, both by the union and the school board. So if you approve it tonight, then it's a done deal and it's ready to be discussed.
And that's Tara Collum as well here, right? Joining us absolutely from the LEA. So thank you. Any questions or comments at this point on the motion on the table? Seeing none, all those in favor, please indicate by raising your hand. With 6 votes in the affirmative, and that motion passes. So if we could maybe pause right now and have the 3 of you, Chair Hayward, if you'd like to come up, bring anyone else and maybe give us just an overview of. Sure, that's your discretion. So if you'd like to bring someone else up.
Thank you very, very much. This has been a project that we started last summer, and bringing it in at this point, incredibly grateful for your support. Your gracious conversation earlier this evening. And what we now have for starters is the ability to offer an employer contributed dental plan to our teachers. We have a 3-year contract, and we are incredibly proud of all of the work that the teachers have done for the city, for our students, and really supporting us getting through to this point. Additional benefits that have been worked out by the 3 of us would be a sick bank for employees, and then also an additional health benefit for employees who have been with the district for 30+ years. So this is a huge win for all of us, and we really appreciate your support. President Collins.
Oh, thank you very much. We really appreciate your time, and it was great to be able to work together, and it was a collaboration more than a negotiation. So thank you.
You should all recognize the other person on the team.
Yes, Karen Abraham was also on our team. She's a media specialist at the high school.
Superintendent Tucker, anything from you'd like to share?
Thank you for your support.
So I mean, just give me, for those viewing and in the chamber tonight, I mean, just a couple of things I think are critically important. Certainly that it's a tax cap compliant budget. So I know that was of particular importance. You take it very seriously in structuring a contract that is certainly respectful of ultimately the taxpayers in the city, but also some of the guardrails that put in place in putting a budget together in the city. So thank you for that. And I think also critically important too, on a 3-year contract, you know, I think it acknowledges the employment challenges that everyone's facing, whether it's the public sector or the private sector right now. I'm so pleased that there's a 3-year agreement here, hopefully conveying to the Education Association of how much we value educators in this city, and that a stability is critically important. I hope it gives you the ability to both retain and recruit educators in the future, so we can continue to build on our successes here in the city and our public school system, and really continue to distinguish ourselves for all the right reasons here in the city. I also would just like to say the sick bank, which, and most people may not completely understand that, but what, as I understand it, and correct me if I'm wrong, if you have an educator who is has to leave because of illness and doesn't have enough accrued sick days, that members, teachers can contribute 1 day of their own personal sick time to help that person who has to take an extended time out of school or out of employment. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Right. So it's not like it's a carryover into retirement or something like that. This is actually sort of goodwill from one educator to another in the case of an unfortunate circumstance that may confront someone who just doesn't have the sick time, correct?
Absolutely.
All right. Well, I just want to say thank you for the work that you have all put in on this. I know this has been a real labor. And I don't mean that in a negative sense, but this is a significant achievement. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Any other questions from the council? Oh, terrific.
You're going to make them stay to the end of the meeting, right?
Yeah, I will, yes. Please go out and get home. Yeah, thank you. Moving on to item number 21B, which is the first reading of a petition to lay out a Class 5 highway, Cottonwood Avenue cul-de-sac, and to schedule a public hearing on June 13th, 2022. The city has received a request to lay out a Class 5 road at the end of Cottonwood Avenue. The petition is attached to our documents tonight. The city will be noticing the June 13th, 2022 public hearing, and we'll be scheduling a site visit to the property as well. We series of 3 motions right now. The first one being a move to waive a reading of this petition in its entirety and to read by title only. So made by Councilor Cheney, seconded by Councilor Haynes. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please indicate by raising your hands. It's 6 votes in the affirmative. That motion passes. Secondly, I'd be looking for a motion to move a first reading of a petition to lay out a Class 5 highway, Cottonwood Avenue cul-de-sac. Made by Councilor Felch, seconded by Councilor Hamel. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please indicate by raising your hand. 6 votes in the affirmative, and that motion passes. And finally, be looking for a motion to schedule a public hearing on June 13th, 2022 during the regular city council meeting to gather input prior to any action being taken. So made by Councilor Felch, seconded by Councilor Susie. Any further discussion on that? Seeing none, all those in favor, please indicate by raising your hands. That's 6 votes in the affirmative, and that motion passes. Thank you, councilors. Item number 21C, which is a request authorization to use $18,000 in impact fee revenues to partially offset costs of self-contained breathing apparatus. As we all recall, recently the Laconia Fire Department replaced its aging self-contained breathing apparatus units at a cost of $296,165. Funds are available within the department's impact fee allocations to partially offset this expense. Department is requesting to use these funds. Approval of this request will reduce the amount to be paid from general fund revenues by $18,000. It will also reduce the impact fees available for the fire department expenses by $18,000, leaving a balance of $1,169.87. This request has been submitted by Fire Chief Kirk Biotti. So we're looking for a motion right now to move that the city council authorize the use of $18,000 in impact fee revenues to partially offset costs of the self-contained breathing apparatus. So made by Counselor Cheney, seconded by Counselor Haynes. Is there any further discussion on this motion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please indicate by raising your hands. That's 6 votes in the affirmative, and that motion passes. Under item number 21D, which is the first reading of ordinance 2022-221 to amend City Code Chapter 221, Vehicles and Traffic regarding increasing the parking fees on Lakeside Avenue and at Endicott Rock Park, and to schedule a public hearing for April 25th, 2022. Scott, would you perhaps lead us through this from a
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. So briefly, since we installed the kiosk back in 2017 as part of the Lakeside Avenue redevelopment of the whole area, prices have been $1 an hour on Lakeside Avenue and $2 an hour in the beach parking lot. This proposal, after the public hearing and your affirmative vote, would raise the parking to $1.25 an hour for on-street and $2.50 an hour at the parks. This will be the first increase in 5 years. We've listed some comparable communities and what they charge for parking at some other resort type of areas. We know that just the cost of maintenance of the kiosk and replacement, motherboards and those type of stuff has certainly increased. So this will help us kind of keep pace. One other component of it right now, if you look at your budget book, all of the revenue from the parking on Lakeside Avenue comes into the general fund. And the first $25,000 of revenue in the beach parking lot comes into the general fund. The remainder of the beach parking goes into a Weir's Beach reserve account and can help upgrade things like when we did the bathhouse renovations last year and other improvements there. Along with this, we're recommending that instead of the first $25,000 of parking coming into the general fund, that we bump that up to make it the first $30,000 of parking to the general fund. That would be a $5,000 increase to the general fund, but it still would continue to be an increase in what goes into the Weir's Beach account as well. So that's those are the highlights, and you've got a couple of proposed motions there in front of you.
Thank you very much. So a series of 3 motions looking to move a motion to move to waive a reading of this ordinance in its entirety and to read by title only. So made by Counselor Cheney, seconded by Counselor Haynes. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please indicate by raising your hand. 6 votes in the affirmative, and that motion passes. The second, looking for a motion to move a first reading of ordinance 2022-221. So made by Counselor Haynes, seconded by Counselor Cheney. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please indicate by raising your hands. That's 6 votes in the affirmative, and that motion passes. And finally, looking to move to schedule a public hearing on April 25th, 2022, during the regular city council meeting to gather input prior to any action being taken. So made by Counselor Haynes, seconded by Counselor Hamel. Any further discussion? Seeing none, Counselor Felch.
Yeah, I noticed. Says you're increasing it to 30,000, but under physical impact, it says raise approximately 35,000.
The combined fee increase by going from $1 to $1.25 and from $2 to $2.50 will raise an additional $35,000 for the general fund, an additional $5,000 for the beach refurbishment account. So 35 will flow into the fund from all of the money increase that comes on Lakeside Ave, and an additional 5,000 from the beach. And then the remainder of that increase will stay with the Weir's Beach refurbishment account.
Okay, is this all beaches or just the Weir's Beach?
That Weirs Beach, whatever gets raised at Weirs Beach stays at Weirs Beach. And the request to have you vote on this at your next meeting would allow staff a few weeks to work with the programmers and get the machines reprogrammed for the new rates and get them back out of storage from the winter. And we're ready to go for the Saturday of Memorial Day weekend.
Any other questions or comments? Okay, with this motion on the table, all those in favor, please indicate by raising your hands. 6 votes in the affirmative. That motion passes. Item number 21E, which is the first reading of Resolution 2022-05 relative to submitting a grant application and accepting grant funding from the American Rescue Plan of 2021, ARPA, for the Northern Lakeport Area Sewer Replacement Project. The American Rescue Plan Act of 2021 provides $350 billion in additional funding for state and local governments. The New Hampshire Department of Environmental Services is making ARPA funds available to infrastructure projects identified on their 2021 Clean Water State Revolving Fund project priority list. The Northern Lakeport Area Sewer Replacement Project is listed as Project 77 on the project priority list and is scheduled to receive a 30% ARPA grant in the amount of $747,600. The Northern Lakeport Area Sewer Replacement Project is currently in final design, has an estimated project cost of $2.5 million. The funding for this project will be a loan from the Clean Water State Revolving Loan Fund. The ARPA grant will reduce the loan amount by $747,600. The outcome of these votes tonight, if in the affirmative, would authorize Public Works to submit an application to the 2021 American Rescue Plan Grant Program for the Northern Lakeport Area Sewer Replacement Project. So before we dive headlong into the motions here, is there anything that we've missed here that needs clarification, Scott, or?
No, I think we actually spoke of this when we applied for the loan to do the project. And then because this 2021 ARPA grant wasn't known to us last year when we put the budget and therefore didn't show up into the anticipated grants, and this exceeds $10,000, we need to do a public hearing and formally accept it for that reason. So I think we've talked about this at a couple of meetings ago, but this is just formally to do a public hearing so that the public can comment before we accept the grant.
Okay, terrific. So the first motion of the series of 3 is a motion to waive the reading of the resolution 2022-05 in its entirety and read by title only. So made by Counselor Cheney, seconded by Counselor Susie. Any further discussion on that motion? Seeing none, all those in favor of that motion, please indicate by raising your hand. 6 votes in the affirmative. That motion passes. The second motion we're looking for is to move a first reading of resolution 2022-05 relative to submitting a grant application to and accepting grant funding from the American Rescue Plan Act of 2021 for the Northern Lakeport Area Sewer Replacement Project. So made by Counselor Felch, seconded by Counselor Haynes. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please indicate by raising your hand. 6 votes in the affirmative, and that motion passes. And finally, be looking to move to schedule a public hearing on April 25th, 2022 during the regular city council meeting to gather public input prior to any action being taken. So made by Counselor Felch, seconded by Counselor Susie. Any further discussion? Seeing none, I'd ask if you're in favor, please raise your hands. 6 votes in the affirmative. That motion passes. Item number 21F. First reading of resolution 2022-06 relative to submitting a grant application and accepting grant funding from the ARPA Act of 2021 for wastewater planning. American, as indicated earlier, the ARPA of 2021 provides $350 billion in additional funding for state and local governments. New Hampshire Department of Environmental Services is making ARPA funds available for planning, asset management, and energy audit measure implementation projects identified on their 2021 Clean Water State Revolving Fund project priority list. Laconia is listed as Project 30 on the wastewater planning project priority list. Public Works Department is working with an engineering consultant to develop a sewer master plan scope that includes an analysis of the existing system, recommendations for system rehabilitation and expansion, and an intensive cleaning and inspection program for existing sewer siphons, which are primarily located at brook and river crossings. Laconia is eligible to receive up to $100,000 in grant funding for a sewer master plan. If approved this evening, the City Council will authorize Public Works to submit an application to the 2021 American Rescue Plan Grant Program for the Sewer Master Plan. This was submitted by Krista Larson, Assistant Public Works Director. So this is a series of 3 motions. First one is a move to waive a reading of the resolution 2022-06 in its entirety and to read by title only. So made by Councilor Cheney, seconded by Councilor Susie. Any further discussion? Seeing none. All those in favor, please indicate by raising your hand. 6 votes in the affirmative. That motion passes. Secondly, looking to move a first reading of resolution 2022-6 relative to submitting a grant application to and accepting grant funding from the American Rescue Plan Act of 2021 for wastewater planning. So made by Councilor Hamel, seconded by Councilor Felch. Any further discussion on that motion? Seeing none, all those in favor indicate by raising your hands. That's 6 votes in the affirmative. That motion passes. And finally, looking to move to schedule a public hearing on April 25th, 2022 during the regular City Council meeting to gather public input prior to any action being taken. So made by Councilor Susie, seconded by Councilor Littman. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please indicate by raising your hand. That's 6 votes in the affirmative. That motion passes. Councilor Littman, you slip out on some of these because you're in my blind spot. It's just, I just don't see you that well. Maybe that's intentional.
It's hard to get to see.
Okay. Moving on to item number 21G, as in golf. This is a request to submit a letter of interest to the Northern Borders Regional Commission's State Economic and Infrastructure Development Investment Grant Program for a 1,000-foot multi-use trail on Elm Street. Northern Border Regional Commission, its mission is to fund economic development and infrastructure projects throughout designated counties in its 4 state service area. The SEID grant program provides a 50% grant for infrastructure projects such as pedestrian and multi-use trails. On October 2021, a conceptual plan for the Wow Trail Opeechee Loop was presented to City Council. The Opeechee Loop is envisioned to be a multi-use trail that connects the Wow Trail from its trailhead on Elm Street in Lakeport to the Wow Trail in the city's downtown. Laconia is listed on the New Hampshire Department of Transportation 10-year plan to receive a transportation alternatives grant to construct the multi-use trail on Elm Street from Franklin Street to Hickory Stick Lane. An SEID grant is being sought to fund a 1,000-foot section of the Opeechee Loop. This project, if funded, will start at the trailhead on Elm Street to the limit of the city's TAP project at the intersection of Elm and Franklin Street. Once the letter of interest is reviewed by Northern Borders Regional Commission, applicants will receive an invitation to apply. So the conceptual level cost estimate for this 1,000-foot section of the Opeechee Loop is $250,000. This grant would provide 50% funding and require a 50% match. Additional funding sources that are being pursued to support this match include a USDA Community Facilities Grant and funding from the Wow Trail itself. Krista Larson, Assistant Public Works Director, has submitted this and recommends the City Council authorize a letter of interest that be submitted for this 1,000-foot extension. So I'll be looking right now for a motion to move the City Council to authorize Public Works to submit a letter of interest to the State Economic and Infrastructure Development Investment Grant Program for an approximately 1,000-foot multi-use trail on Elm Street from the Wow Trail to Franklin Street. So made by Councilor Felch, seconded by Councilor Cheney. Is there any further discussion on this? Grants are good. All those, so we'll call the question right now. All those in favor of the motion on the table? 6 votes in the affirmative, and that motion passes. Item number 21H, which is an amendment to EGM Holdings LLC lease agreement for parking spaces for occupants of the residential units above the Colonial Theater. On November 22nd, 2021, the city council approved a lease agreement with EJM Holdings LLC to provide parking spaces for residents of the units above the Colonial Theater. Attached is a copy of the agreement, which provided 10 spaces in the city hall parking lot and 8 spaces on in the Main Street lot. Rusty McClare of EJM Holdings LLC has requested that the lease agreement be amended to provide for 9 parking spaces in the city hall parking lot and 9 spaces in the Main Street lot. A map is attached showing the new allocation of parking spaces in both lots. This staff report was submitted by Scott Myers, our city manager. Right now, I'll be looking for a motion to move these, a motion to move that the lease agreement with EJM Holdings LLC for parking spaces for occupants of residential units above the Colonial Theater be revised to provide for 9 parking spaces in the City Hall parking lot and 9 parking spaces in the Main Street lot as presented. I will say that I have no personal interest in this, although I do have residents and parking spaces in the lot, but have no position on this. It does not affect me. Nothing to do with me. So we're looking for the motion. So made by Counselor Lippman, seconded by Counselor Hammond. Is there any further discussion on this? Counselor Cheney.
Mr. Mayor, I'd ask that we postpone this item to the next meeting. I'd like a more detailed opportunity to review this. Some of the things that I thought I understood about the leasing agreement and where parking spaces would be assigned are not what I understand most recently has occurred. So I'd ask that we postpone this.
So I guess the motion
Table it.
would be a motion to table right now, which is non-debatable. All those in favor of the motion to table right now, please indicate by raising your hands. All those opposed? It's a tie vote. It doesn't pass.
Well, if I might, I'm disappointed, Mr. Mayor, that I understand you and I and others walked this. We were led to believe there would be 9 parking spaces in the City Hall parking lot for each of one for each of the units and 9 over here behind the post office. That would be the second space for each unit. I now understand that's not how EJM has been doling out those parking spaces. And I've received more than a few calls about whether it was appropriate to assign more spaces to one leasee or owner than another. So that's the reason that I asked to table this matter so that we could look at it more carefully. I don't see anything in here about how the spaces are supposed to be assigned, other than EJM will assign them. So if they want to give all 9 spaces to one occupant, they can do that. There's nothing in here that says all 18 spaces couldn't go to one occupant. I think we all understand it's supposed to be 2 for each unit, but it doesn't say that. And it doesn't say that they have to be 1 for each unit in the one lot, 1 for each unit in the post office or behind the post office lot. That's my concern, Mr. Mayor. And I will be voting against this tonight for that reason.
Scott Myers.
Well, thank you. Just for a little bit of background on this. I think the intent was that 9 units, 2 parking spaces per unit. The request was for 18 spaces. I don't think we ever got into one being in one lot and one being in the other. And actually the reason we went from 9 and 9 to 10 and 8 originally is somebody somewhere along the discussion that's been going on for a couple of years said, well, if you have 9 and 9, then you've got 4 units who can have 2 of their spaces side by side, so their cars are parked next to each other, husband and wife, parent and child, whatever. But then you've got an extra spot, and then one person's got 1 spot in this lot, and their other spot is over in the other lot. And that's where it went to the 10 and 8, and that way they were even numbers, and it could be 2 by 2, and everybody would have 2 spaces side by side. However, it worked out. The request came back to go back. It was originally discussed 9 and 9, and I'm just bringing that to the council. But that was the original thought, was to split them evenly 9 and 9. It went to 10 and 8 with Rusty's agreement, and then whatever reason, something's changed, and he's requesting the 9 and 9. But it was never, ever my understanding that it was going to be 1 space in one lot and 1 space on the other lot, because again, that just didn't seem to make sense for 2 people or 2 vehicles that were sharing the same residential unit to be in opposite ends of parking areas.
Counselor Susie.
I thought, I remember when we had the discussion 2 council meetings ago about this parking along with the parking garage. And there was a discussion about the people that were living in those condos. They would have 1 car maybe parked there on the Main Street lot and 1 car back here in the city lot. The one on the Main Street lot would be the one closest, like the one who use groceries and that kind of stuff, or close for easiness. Okay, and so I'm just wondering why we're having, why is it being split? I mean, in other words, is it 9 spaces on the Main Street lot, 9 spaces in City Hall? But are those 9 spaces being allocated like 1 each on each lot?
Was that really the intent of our agreement with them, to get into that level of minutia? I think, then we allocated spaces in the 2 parking lots. Seems like we're just getting into micromanagement of a lease agreement.
We're micromanaging a 50-year lease.
It's 18 spaces, whether that's all it is. It's 9 and 9 or 10 and 8. We're going back to what originally 9 and 9. I think we should just move beyond it and work on other things.
I'm fine with 9 and 9, Henry. I'm concerned about the lessor can determine to give all the spaces. There's not even a requirement in here that the residents in that building get the 18 spaces.
I'm sure it would affect the resale value and the sale value of it. I think we're getting into micromanaging the arrangement between the people who buy units there and what the parking arrangement is. So honestly.
Counselor Felch.
So this goes back to my original reason that I didn't agree with this, is now we're taking another space away from our downtown merchants, where when those spaces are basically the same distance as City Hall parking lot. If you walk them out, it's within 10 to 20 feet. There's no reason we should be taking parking spaces away from our downtown merchants. So I am totally against this.
I don't believe that we have to take any spaces away from downtown merchants. We purchased a parking lot behind the church, and we have a plan to have that parking lot used. So I think we should be able to increase spaces. So if that's the reason you're voting against it, I think that's not a valid
You're talking
reason.
distance from the businesses. You got businesses downtown
If
that
you-
people go in and get something for 5 minutes
You're
and come back out.
misunderstanding.
They're not going to
You're
park behind the church.
One at a time.
misunderstanding what I'm saying is that parking that's long-term can move over to the lot that we purchased behind the church, and more short-term parking, which I think you're advocating for, so that people can run in and out of the businesses that like the turnover. We have the opportunity to do that. We shouldn't worry about this one space.
And aren't these long-term parking?
It's a different type of long-term parking. But if the issue is you're concerned that we don't have enough
You have
spaces
your
close enough.
opinion, I have mine.
Sure.
We're taking spaces away from our downtown merchants.
That's one way to look at it, but it's not that the math doesn't hold up.
Okay, so I don't think we've gotten to a motion yet, have we? We don't have a motion on the table, do we?
Make a
No,
motion to approve the contract.
Oh, okay, so right now, the motion, just to clarify. so, Council Littman's motion is move that the lease agreement with EJM Holdings LLC for parking spaces for occupants of residential units above the Colonial Theater be revised to provide for 9 parking spaces in the City Hall parking lot and 9 parking spaces in the Main Street lot as presented. Councilor Littman has made the motion for that. Is there a second? Councilor Haynes. Is there further discussion on this motion? Seeing none, Call the question. All those in favor of the motion, please indicate by raising your hands. 3 votes in the affirmative. All those opposed? I'm not going to vote.
You effectively tabled it. Thank you.
But I also think that, perhaps,
Mr. Mayor, can I interrupt you? I think we can get through this. I just would like a little time to see what's in here. I haven't had a chance to read it. I have had something going on that kept me from reviewing my notes. But I want to know that what we're giving for 50 years is what I understood we were giving.
The only change to the entire lease is instead of 8 and 10 being the parking spaces is now they're 9 and 9 between the 2 lots. There's no change to the term. There's no change about the pay in full for 5 years. There's no change to the price. We added the language that the council could, request that they move to the parking garage if and when that's rehabbed. Literally, the only thing that's changed is instead of 8 and 10 spaces, we're shifting one from City Hall parking lot to Main Street parking lot. The entire language of the rest of the agreement is identical to what the council passed a few months ago.
Counselor Haynes.
If I might, Mr. Mayor. I have to, and I don't want to put words in Councilor Lippman's mouth. Here we go again. We pass something and then we decide, oh, let's review it again. I'm sorry. We negotiated this, we talked about it. I'm fine with it. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
So with a tie vote, it stays the way it was. Right? Or it can be
Motion
dropped.
doesn't pass it as it is, remains as it is, I guess.
Yeah.
Can we table it to the next meeting?
I think we've already lost the table motion, but you can always bring it back the next meeting, I guess.
Of course, we table the motion.
All those in favor of the motion being tabled, please indicate by raising your hands.
I think we've already.
I think it's gonna be tough to go back to that. I think it's.
Wouldn't you have to have someone?
It can come back for if I'm right, it can come back for a revote.
Well, that's what I thought the table would do. I apologize.
I think it accomplishes the same thing. The no decision going to be made tonight on this motion, and we might take it up on April 25th.
Thank you. Mr. Mayor.
So I don't disagree, but could someone on the prevailing side, which in this case is the 3-3 tie and nothing changed, so it would either be Councilor Cheney, Susie, or Felch, make a request that it be put on the April 25th agenda for a reconsideration?
Do that right now.
Make that.
All those in favor of it coming back before us on April 25th, please raise your hands. 1, 2, 3, 4 votes in the affirmative. All those opposed, 4-2, the motion passes. It'll be on the agenda for April 25th.
And please let me know if there's any additional information anybody needs so that I can help you get prepared for the 25th.
Okay, so moving on to item number 21I. A request to approve temporary traffic order 2022-03 for the New England Coffee Festival and request to waive fees associated with the event. The inaugural New England Coffee Festival is scheduled for May 20th, May 21st on 2022, with several events throughout the downtown area. Organizers of this event are requesting approval of the attached temporary traffic order and a waiver of special event and licensing fees associated with the event. So we're looking right now for a motion to move to approve temporary traffic order 2022-03 for the New England Coffee Festival and to waive special event and licensing fees associated with the event. So made by Councilor Susie, seconded by Councilor Felch. Is there any further discussion on this matter? Seeing none, all those in favor, please indicate by raising your hand. 6 votes in the affirmative. That motion passes. And thank you very much for the work you're doing with this. I see Ben Bellaro back there. You guys, this is exciting stuff. I'm so glad you're doing it. Glad the council could help out. Sorry, it was the last item on the agenda this evening, but you got a little entertainment, I hope. So I'd like to adjourn. Oh, I would though.
Well, you can't.
So I'd like to make a motion that we go into a non-public session under RSA 91A3, Roman 2, subsection D, which is consideration of the acquisition, sale, or lease of real or personal property, which, if discussed in the public, would likely benefit a party or parties whose interests are adverse to the general community. We will go after non-public session, we'll go back into session, but there'll be no business taken up in public session. We'll just be adjourning the meeting.
So you're looking for a motion and a
I am.
second and a roll call vote.
Yes, I am. Counselor Cheney, so made. Counselor Susie, second. Seeing no further discussion on this, I'd call for a roll call vote. City Clerk.
Counselor Cheney,
Yes.
Counselor Susie,
Yes.
Counselor Finn,
Yes.
Counselor Haynes,
Yes.
Counselor Hamel,
Yes.
Counselor Felch,
Yes.
6 votes in the affirmative. That motion passes and we're in non-public. I think we'll just take 2 minutes to use laptop.